Hey, folks, Miguel Dorati back here on the MMA Museum podcast, and we are taking a part two with Pete Rodley. We are looking at the history of Canadian MMA, and really, I can't think of anyone much better to talk about Canadian MMA than Pete. We part one, we went for a while. We went for over an hour and a half. Started at the very beginning with Harold Howard and got all the way to him meeting George St. Pierre, which was
Yeah.
really the third. You mentioned it was like the third show that you had done with UCC. Is that with
Yeah, it was the
that
third
whole?
UCC event that we did in a place called Sherbrooke in Quebec. So it's about 2 hours, I guess, northwest, I believe, I could be wrong, of Montreal. So it was the show where we went from a couple thousand to a couple thousand more. And that's the show where things really started falling into place. And that was the
And
one
George St.
where
Pierre didn't fight on that show, but he showed up with his dad, and
he
you're
was
gonna have to
15,
listen to
man.
part one of Pete's interview to get the full scoop. But I will let you know that George St. Pierre had hair at that point.
Yeah, he had that bowl haircut that you see, yeah, that we all had when in the 70s, right? But he was so shy. And he was like 15 or something, right? And I'm there and I'm running my ass off. You've been there at your shows. When you're a promoter, you don't sit down. And this guy comes over, this dad, and he spoke a bit of English and he says, "Yeah, nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah," in his French accent. And this is my son, and he wants to do this eventually, and explain that he's doing very good in the jiu-jitsu circuit and amateur stuff, doing what he should be doing, and that he was really excelling. And of course, I was always very supportive and receptive and always made time. And George was so shy, and he come up to me and he must have rehearsed it because the only thing he knew in English, he says, "I would like to be one of your warriors." And I said, "You know what? That's awesome, man. Keep on your path, keep doing what you're doing, and call me when you're 18." And he did. And after his first fight was with Ivan Menjivar, and I was like, I know, right? Trial by fire. And
Well,
I
he's a
was like,
lot bigger than Ivan, but
oh yeah,
I kind of shake my head also for Ivan too, because he's a guy that is, George St. Pierre is kind of going down in history kind of thing. Ivan
yeah,
Menjivar is a guy some will forget, and he doesn't deserve that either because he was a real, probably
amazing.
legit 145 pounder, you know?
Yes, but I
And
don't think we had a 45 back then. That was
right,
the thing. It was,
right. So
I believe they
he's
fought
fighting
at
bigger guys. Here
170.
he fights St. Pierre, but Ivan Menjivar is a guy you could legitimately put in with anyone in the world.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, he has, didn't he fight like Barrett Yashida? He fought all
I
sorts of
put
guys.
him in with Shaolin Rivera.
Oh, wow.
And one
Wow.
of the interesting things is I think that was Shaolin, may have been Shaolin's debut, may not have been his debut. Shaolin
Uh-huh.
fought a couple of times. Um, what I remember about Ivan was that was the time I met Stefan Patry because Ivan bought his cornerman was Stefan, which is kind of inappropriate, but that's the way Stefan was, kind of like getting in his claws, on good fighters and stuff. He did have an eye for talent. He was no
Oh,
slouch, let's put it that
absolutely. He
way.
provided a
And
lot of opportunities. Yeah.
yeah, and you're looking, some guys were that way in, trying to make money, which you can't really blame people for. I have no money, so at this point, maybe I should have done some stuff like that. Signed up fighters and things, but I like not doing that, and I didn't
Hmm.
like I've accompanied fighters alone, just me and them, but it was kind of like a couple of times by their request. I don't think Ivan preferred to have Stefan there as his cornerman.
No, there's a lot of guys that would have been better suited as a corner man, but Steph was a good manager. I'll give kudos, man. Like he found a lot of good opportunities. He made the guys a lot of money, and yeah, he did good things that way. But he's definitely not a corner man. I've rolled with him, you know. But whatever. But yeah, so George's first fight was against Ivan, and that raised my eyebrow. I was like, oh shit, okay, I see something. And I don't know if it was the second or his third fight with UCC, he fought Justin Bruckman. And Justin was a monster. Like he used to do bodybuilding. He was ripped, tattooed, scary guy, world class judoka, one of the first to do this in Canada, and he was our lightweight champion. And George went in and just manhandled him, absolutely manhandled him. And I was like, okay, we got something here. And I remember the interview after they interviewed Justin to say, hey, it didn't go as you planned, blah, blah, blah. How they do in the after interviews. And all Justin said was, that kid's a stud. That was his quote. He was like, this kid's a stud. And we all predicted what was going to happen with George. And the last time I saw him, actually, he showed up at the first Freedom Fight event where we did USA versus Canada. It was actually the first primetime airing of MMA on national TV in North America. So they were working on the first Ultimate Fighter at the time. And so we were on TSN. This show was on, I believe it aired August of 2005 on a Monday night, 7 to 9 p.m. leading into WWF Raw. And back then, you remember, that's unheard of. We used to get like 4 a.m. time slots and
Yeah,
stuff
no,
like
7
that.
to
Right?
9 is that's absolute prime time.
We outdrew the best UFC by we doubled. We got like something like 800,000 households. Like it was madness. It was insane. So anyhow, George showed up. That was the fight, the show with Fitch and Joslin.
Yep.
So George just showed up, didn't tell me, he didn't give me an opportunity to give him VIPs. He paid to get in, and he approached me, and I remember he said, "Good things happen to good people." That's what he said to me.
Good.
And yeah, it was so cool. So cool.
So let's go through some of those early guys like George. Obviously George is a historic figure, but there are guys in Canada that definitely had their moments, and
Hmm.
you know who, who was a Satanist guy?
Who?
There was like a Satanist, like a guy that fought. I think he fought Aaron Riley one time. That a friend, not Payne Peters, because Payne was was a guy with an attitude, but there was a guy who legitimately called himself a Satanist. Do you remember this guy?
No shit. Well, there was a few guys that would like enter the ring to Slayer and stuff like that,
No, I'm
but
talking.
no
Well,
one.
let me look him up because he was a friend of George's. I remember George kind of cornering
Are you
him,
talking about
or
Steve Claveau? Steve
yes,
Claveau,
that's exactly it.
the,
Yes,
the snake? Yeah,
yeah.
no, he ain't no Satanist, man. That guy's a little teddy bear. I tell you that Steve Claveau, when he comes walking in a room, and he fought at like 135, like he fought like Richie Nancoud, people like that. But he was one of the first jujitsu whizzes back then. And yeah, like his email was Snake666. He was a metal fan. And it's like me, like I love the metal, I love that, but I ain't no Satanist, you know what I mean? No, Clavo ain't no Satanist. He just
He fought Aaron Riley.
did he really?
Yeah, he fought Aaron
Steve
Riley on a
Clavo?
show called XMMA. It's Crow Time in
No shit.
September of 2008, and Aaron, I think, was the one who told me that at least at that show he was presenting himself with the whole 666 thing and the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. Whatever, like it, no, he ain't
He
no
went 15 minutes
Satanist.
with Aaron.
It was just imagery, you know what I mean? Like when you enter the ring and you got this aura about you, and like, it's just imagery. That's all that was. He loves metal. He's still, I see his Facebook posts, and he's putting like Slayer and System of a Down and stuff, but he's like the sweetest family man, hardworking guy, no religious shtick, none of that stuff. Clavo was awesome, awesome to deal with, great guy, and he helped a lot of people out. So yeah, no, I can clear the air on that one. He ain't no Satan.
Well, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. What about Payne Peters? Because Payne
Yeah,
was one of the guys that, to me, got it in terms of the show, as well
yeah.
as he was no slouch with his judo background and stuff. You could put him in there, And
Yeah.
he never made the UFC kind of thing. But I think as far as a showman,
Mm-hmm.
Payne was ahead of his time.
Way. And he got it. Like for me from the get-go, like I was a pro wrestling fan when I was a kid. That's what I wanted to do, but then I stopped growing. I've been a 6'1", 220 since like grade 9. So back in the 80s, you ain't doing pro wrestling when you're. So I always understood the psychology of always giving people something to relate to, presenting a storyline. So I kind of transcended that into NHB back then before MMA. And I always encouraged like doing the pre-fight interviews. I didn't want guys, hello, my name is Pete Rodley. I'm here to fight, blah, blah, blah. I said, bring out your natural personality. Don't pretend to be something you're not, but amplify it 10 times. That's what I would always tell people because everyone wants to have someone to relate to. So when people go to a show and they see a Payne Peters, giving people the finger and I'm gonna feel the pain, blah 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 blah. It's like a fantasy thing. So that gave some, things to relate to. Then you got your good guy like George St. Pierre and people like that who are well mannered, and that gives a hero to those people. And then we bring up guys like Jeremy Horn, who, you look at him and Gumby, and meanwhile, he's, Jeremy Horn. So everyone, I just told them to just bring their natural, who they are, their natural personalities and amplify it. And Payne definitely got it. The entertainment aspect, cutting promos the way he did, the in-ring stuff. And that got him fights. And, he won a lot of them. He lost a few of them, but it was always a scrap. And he was always stepping up and he understood promotion.
I got
And
to work with him one time, and I wish I'd gotten to work with him more, and especially I gave him the most brutal match. He fought
who?
Matt Hume.
Matt Hume. Oh my God.
It was Hume's last fight, but Hume said, "Hey, I want to do a fight for you," and you know, um, Hume to me is a guy that is probably the most talented fighter like that I've seen. If you watch his fight with Eric Paulson, that went down in the
Amazing.
90s, it looks like a modern fight because both guys were so advanced. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So,
So you put Payne
uh,
in there with Matt Hume, and then
yeah,
Monty puts him in there against Matt Hughes. Like, did you guys not like that?
yes, that's the problem with the big personality kind of thing is that, you know, it comes with a little bit of tough matchmaking. But what I remember about Payne was that fight went down in Florida on our shows with Dan. And
All right.
um, we negotiated with Harley Davidson uh, outlet down there for him to come out on a Harley Davidson bike, like
Yeah, we
ride the
did the same
bike out
thing.
there. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it didn't happen on our show because I don't know if the venue nixed it or Dan thought I don't think Dan nixed it. I think it was the venue that said no. Maybe the commission also. Um,
Hmm.
but he wanted to bring the whole show. And the problem with that with him is that he did what he usually did, which I'm going to kill Matt Hume. I'm going to talk a little smack and stuff. And Matt fucked him up. Matt hurt his arm
Like,
with an
oh,
arm bar
okay.
because he didn't like it. Matt. That's the thing about Matt is nicest guy in the world. If you have you ever met him?
No, I've never met him.
Oh,
No.
okay, no, nicest guy in the world. Um, an educator in terms of the sport, like
Hmm.
but a mean streak. You know what I mean? He's got a mean streak, and
Hmm.
Payne Peters caught the long end of that one. And I kind of feel bad because I would have liked to have worked with him better because you knew because he got beat in that fight, and he definitely took it like a man too. You know what I mean? He
Always did.
didn't complain to me, didn't
No.
never talked bad about us or the show or anything
Nope.
like that anywhere in public that I saw. And I thought that he would think, oh, they wanted him to win. They bought me in for the, something like
He
that.
knew
You'd
what
hear
he was getting into, and he would scrap anybody.
He was
You
a
know,
man.
he would have
He was a
strapped a
man.
guy 100 pounds heavier. He didn't give a shit back then.
I'm
And
mad at Payne now because he's been ducking my interviews. I've
really?
been trying to get him for a long time. Yeah, he's put me off. We're in July right now, right? So he'll
Yeah.
say something like, "Yeah, call me in October," and then so I follow up. I
Yeah,
call him
yeah.
in October, and then he's like, "Yeah, try January." So he's been blowing me off, but I would love to get him, especially nowadays, because I know that there's a guy that's got some great stories.
Yeah, he does. You know, his time was brief. It was the early days. A lot of people don't know who he is, you know, because he never won a title. He never got top. But you know what? Like this guy, we put him in there against a guy named Stéphane Ouellet. This guy was known as the godson of all Quebecers. It was actually the first top 10 ranked pro boxer to fight in MMA or NHB, whatever it was
I
back
remember
then.
that UCC. You guys got a lot of press, good press for that. In terms of
Yo, there was
promotion,
like
and that's what helped you get the audiences.
yeah, man, there was like 6,000 people at that show. And Payne just slammed him, just judoed this cat. And the guy got himself disqualified. He was headbutting him, he bit him. And oh, yeah, it was scary. That was the one time where I thought I was going to have an incident in the audience. And I had a bunch of brothers in the front row, and they told me if anything happens, we'll just stand up and people will calm down. And people were like getting ready to rush the ring when Willett got himself disqualified against Payne, and Payne was like, "What the fuck's going on?" type thing. And I was scared because my elderly parents are in the front row. My three children were little. I'm like, oh fuck, I don't want them in the middle of a riot like what happened in California with the Mongols. Remember that was the
Yeah.
ultimate athlete event. I didn't want no part of that. And these dudes stood up, looked around, and everyone went, "Yep, we're gonna simmer down," and everything got defused. But yeah, Payne got a lot of press for that and just manhandled this guy big time. Um, you know what? He was extremely popular. He did extremely well, and his contributions to the sport are legit,
Yeah,
big
no,
time.
he's a foundation piece for me. When I look at early Canada MMA, obviously
Hmm.
he came after Harold and that era of guys.
Yeah.
But once the UCC started, he was a guy that uh, with the whole show kind of helped elevate and put it on the map.
Hmm.
I really would like um, people to
I'll
remember Payne as well.
remind me. I'll shoot him a message and say, "Yeah, this Miguel guy is a cool cat," because he probably gets
He
people.
knows me
Oh
because
no, he's dealt with you. He knows who you
he
are.
remembers I match made that fight for him. So he may actually now I may be suffering the consequences of like he feels like I bought him in for
No,
the job kind of thing. But
no, I doubt that.
so yeah, shoot him a message because, like I said, you know how my interviews are. They flow free, and
Yeah, man.
I just want to chat with him because I think he's was an interesting guy, and he's probably still an interesting guy. And always those guys, when you talk about the history of stuff, there's always a perspective that could be missed that should be documented. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So he's
yeah.
got to talk. He's got to come out and talk.
And it's always interesting. Like, what are we doing now? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And you know, I know Payne's got a good family life. He's a family man, dedicated, good dad, works hard. That's all I really know. I haven't chatted with him in a very long time. We used to talk pro wrestling back in the day. You know,
I can talk
topic
pro
would come
wrestling.
up. Hey, who's the best tag team of all time? You know, let's debate. I'm like, there's no debate. It's the Road Warriors. Like, hey, what? End of story. Next topic. You know. So we would
Yeah,
go
for
off on
sure.
that shit like that, right? Just being silly kids. Yep. Other than
So
him, like there was a
and looking through
plethora.
here with UCC, you guys sort of also started to usher in. For me, there was a time maybe when George was in the UFC, right into that era, 2005, maybe where the sport was carried by Canada. They were doing big shows in Canada. There were
Hmm.
so many fighters per, capita from Canada coming out,
Hmm.
all top level guys. And the pay-per-views that George topped when they would play Montreal in November. He always fought in November, right?
Hmm.
Um, you guys literally carried the sport through that era until it exploded into the real worldwide phenomenon now. But while it was
Yeah,
still nascent, there was a moment where definitely Canada carried the sport with that. And,
absolutely.
and, and there was a point
Absolutely.
where a lot of the guys that were doing well in the UFC had been through your UCC show. Let's talk about the David Loiseau, the Crow.
Yeah, yeah, he fought on my June 2nd, 2000. He debuted against Justin Bruckman. We were just talking about him. He lost, got choked or choked or armbarred. I think, yeah, I think he got armbarred, and then they rematched. Stefan didn't like the fact that the Crow lost because he was pushing him as the biggest thing. So instant rematch at UCC 2, and then Loiseau, I believe, guillotined and choked out Justin. Yeah, great, amazing kid. He was like 18 when he started his first fight, and he also got it. It's Crow time. He had like his catchphrase, and that was way before "Smell what the Rock is cooking." None of that. So he got it. He got the showmanship, but he trained hard, and he had some self-doubt issues when he started, but that comes from being 18. You lose your first fight. Yeah, amazing. Like his fights in UFC were amazing, but you also got guys like Nanku and Steve Vigneault, Anthony Rea, Jonathan Goulet, the Road Warrior. I could go on and on. We had guys, Dennis Kang fought Joe Dirksen. Both of them ended up doing big things. Um, yeah, the list goes on and on. You got all the Quebecers, but you got the West Coast guys too, and you got the Central Canada guys.
Yeah,
Um,
if you want to talk
so
about a Central Canada guy, one of the guys that I thought was just maxed out in potential is a guy named Jason McDonald.
I was just gonna say, I knew you were gonna say McDonald. Yeah, and then I never met him. I've heard only good things. Of course, respect his talent, but he was, and a lot of guys don't forget, and just as well as I do, the pay wasn't there back then. Like we paid better than most, but you can't make a living doing 2 fights a year and then training. So these guys had to work full time. And Jason, I believe, was in Fort McMurray, which is oil town. So he worked on the oil fields. Like, how do you dedicate yourself full time to be, a ranked athlete in the big leagues when you do that? So a lot of guys sort of slip through the cracks like that, right?
Yeah,
Um,
McDonald's a guy I got to book him a few times,
oh,
and
cool.
he's first of all he fought at 205 pounds,
Yeah.
and he's absolutely massive though. You know what I mean?
Oh,
He's
yeah.
he's a huge guy in terms of size.
Yeah.
Um, I'm looking to see back, and I think I want to say that I put him in Rhea. Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I put him in with Anthony Rhea, which is
With
another
Anthony
guy.
Rea, that'd be one hell of a scrap.
Yeah, and the thing about
Wow.
it was that McDonald showed me right away that he took the fight real serious
Huh.
and just got he said I'm not messing around with Anthony Reyes standing up. You know what I mean? And Anthony Reyes definitely was a guy who could hit. Um,
Oh, yeah.
and he got him down and got a submission in like under 3 minutes. And that's
Wow.
that'll put you on the map with me. I liked McDonald, and McDonald shortly after that got into the UFC, and he had a good dozen fights in UFC. It's not like they didn't bring
Hmm.
him back. There's some guys go for a cup of coffee and that's good and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
McDonald actually got into the UFC's roster and rotation for a period of time there in his career.
Hmm.
So he fought tough guys, and he was of the middle Canada guys. I would consider him to be the most talented one of the guys that I saw.
What about Dirksen?
Is Dorkson from the middle of Canada? I never booked
Okay.
Dorks.
Um,
He was more Monty's guy.
El
But yeah, no,
Dirte.
I know he's talented. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then you got guys like from the West Coast, or where the Hood from? Because what is Bill Mahood is another one of those rugged, tough dudes. I think he's from Yellowknife. And people can look that up on the map and see.
Nah, he's a BC boy.
No, he was. He moved to BC and was down there in BC when he was running his career and stuff. But
Yeah.
he's from way up north. He's from way up north.
Yeah,
It's
I
where like
so enjoyed working with Mahood. Um, any young promoters, any young fighters would benefit so much from his knowledge, his demeanor, just the way he approaches business. He's a
yeah,
very, very intelligent guy. Very intelligent guy.
for sure. And also
Um,
a guy with like 400 street fights.
oh
you
yeah, you don't fuck with him. Yeah, that's for sure.
know,
Yeah.
he fought along Cajun Johnson too.
Yep.
Those guys I think were both from up north in Canada at the
Yep.
start, like
Yeah.
somewhere like
Raging
Yellow.
Cage and
Yeah.
Raging Cage and what a personality that kid had. Oh
I'll tell
man.
you a
Great.
Bill Hood story. What I liked about, like, you mentioned Bill's savviness and stuff. When I was
Yeah.
with Bodog, he was in my rotation,
Oh,
and
cool.
um, him and he had a manager or a guy named Rob. I'm not going to remember his first name. He fought one time for us to do a fight. He wasn't uh, going to be a pro fighter kind of thing, but I think he was a
Yeah.
biker guy, with connections and things, and I think he was some of the money behind
Rob.
the team there. Um, and they both sat me down in my office and they said, "Look, this is the deal. We really," and they laid it out with, like, trainers and managers and nutrition and maybe travel for training and a camp and things like that. And they had put the price in the 2006, 2007 era. They said every fighter should probably be making about $50,000 or $60,000. I think 60,000 was the actual price per fight.
Hmm.
And with Bodog, I guess Calvin could have paid that, right? And we no, not too many people got to that price range with us. A few guys did, but not too
Hmm.
many. But that's what they figured out. Um, as a and what I remember about it is that their presentation. I remember thinking, I don't know if they're off. I can't pay them that. I'm not going to pay them that. And
Hmm.
but I don't know if they're trying to just get a raise or anything, or if they're not. I felt like there was a certain amount of, like you said, intelligence behind the presentation. And
Hmm.
now with the UFC's lawsuit, and then looking to compensate guys, how much is it worth? If in 2006, 2007, these guys were right, and you should probably be making about 50 grand a fight, because at the end of the day, 50 grand turns into 35 grand after taxes, and then 10% to your manager, 10% to your trainer,
Hmm. Yeah, you're
over
left
time,
with 15 grand.
20, even 25 grand is good, but you can't, fight twice a year, 50 grand. Back then, nowadays you can't even really live on 50 grand much
Oh my
anymore.
God. No,
The States are in
no,
Canada,
not at
you know
all.
what I mean? Um, so I fall back on that number from 2007. I don't know that they were off, because it was a very good understanding of what the fight game really
Well,
was.
it made sense. That makes perfect sense from the fighter's perspective. But I always approach things where I equally looked at the fighter perspective and the organization's perspective. And if you start paying every fighter $50,000 back then, there's no way you'll be one and done. It
With
wasn't
Bodog, I'm
feasible.
susceptible to that because, we have the owner that's, on the billionaires list, and, people think that they're just they're just going to be able to
Hmm.
grab money. And I think that's kind of the idea of why they sat me down for the presentation, because they
Hmm.
knew that at the end of the day, but those guys don't become rich by throwing their money away either.
Yeah.
So there was
Well, the
definitely.
thing is, I get it. Okay, the guys He can afford it. The owner could afford it personally, but you can't pay out of your personal pocket for a business. It has to make sense in the business model. Okay, here's what I'm getting for sponsorship.
Yeah,
Here's
you
what I'm
can't
getting
take
for
money from the poker
television.
game and come and lose it over here. So you're absolutely.
Yeah, they're not. No one's in business to lose money. So I always tried to find a happy medium. Our
And
pay
we
went.
got. I had the opportunity to raise the level of the sport with Bodog and some of the
Oh yeah.
guys, like with I'll tell you, it's interesting. I picked out a handful of guys that
Hmm.
we gave a 4-fight deal in 16 months. And
Okay.
they went from making 2,000, 3,000 a fight. I gave them a flat fee, no winning bonus, no nothing, just so that you don't, I felt like as a fighter, you're always going to think you're going to win. And then when you get half the pay because you lost, it sends you on a spiral downward, right? So I just wanted to do a flat fee. And then
What was your flat fee typically? What would the start
so
off?
what I did was 4 fights, 16 months, 100K, 25,000 a fight.
Oh fuck. Well,
So,
again,
but
yeah,
but but but
for back
here's
then, that's huge.
yeah, yeah. Put it this way, I'm going to throw the names at you that I selected for this.
All
Okay,
right.
I think I did a pretty good job, and I've been thanked by these guys: George Masvidal, Chael Sonnen, Eddie Alvarez, and I think Cain Velasquez.
Wow,
So
that's no joke.
yeah, we
But you
had
know what? That gave them the exposure, and it gave
Chael
them
says I
some.
saved his career. Chael thanked me when I interviewed him. He stopped as at the end of it. He said, "Thank you to me for that," because
Yep.
it did jumpstart his career. And if you look at it with
Yeah.
Chael, um, losing the Anderson Silva fight, obviously it's still his high point. But to me, the 4-fight run for that contract at Bodog, where he went
Hmm.
4-0, that was the toughest, roughest Chael Sonnen that you were going to fight. And he
Wow.
fought tough guys in that tournament. He fought
Yep.
Russian guys, Amar Suluev, um, you know, uh, Arman Gambarian. I think he fought 2 Russian guys for me. And in that run, that was his best run to me in his career. In
Wow.
the UFC, obviously, it became more of a big show and
Mhm.
things like that. And obviously, that's where he made his real money and stuff. But it started with, you're fighting at $2,000 and you jumped to 25. Every guy that we selected went on to do other things because it really
Mhm.
made a difference early in their career.
Yeah, and a lot of them really appreciate that. And they know, like when you're fighting on a freedom fight MMA or a Bodog, like we were doing big things for our size of shows. But they know that this is basically building a resume. They're getting paid to build a resume, and they knew who the good guys were. They know that you, Miguel, you're not going to hold someone back from an opportunity. If an opportunity called and it didn't screw your show up, you're like, yeah, go for it. And I was the same way. Like even the first freedom fight, I could show you a promotional card. Forrest Griffin, Bonner, who else was an ultimate fighter? I think there was like 3 or 4 guys that were actually Bill Mahood's first opponent in the freedom fight. I think he ended up getting I forget the guy's name, the wrecking machine from California, they call him McKenzie.
Okay.
Tim McKenzie? Yeah.
But
He
Tim
knocked
McKenzie
Bill out.
is from Arizona. But
Oh, is he? Oh, we
yeah,
flew him in from Cali. So
okay.
he was probably training out there. Anyhow, he ended up knocking Bill out in like 9 seconds. I was like, oh
Tim
shit.
McKenzie's another guy I think I put in with Chael.
You did. You
Yeah.
did. But the original opponent from Mahood was Forrest Griffin. And then he was approached to do that. And we talked about it. Me and I believe it was Clint Dahl, and I partnered on the first freedom fight. And we're like, yeah, like let him go. You know what I mean? We have 2 months. Like this is a
I
huge
booked Forrest one time and um he got booked to do that one fight they did in Brazil early in his career. I forget against who, but I released him to go do that. And like you said, yeah, I remember specifically being no-showed. Like I bought a plane ticket for him and being no-showed by Dan Christensen because
Oh, I thought you were saying Forrest no showed.
no, but Big Dan was supposed to fight. I think Big Dan actually did fight Ben Rothwell and knocked Rothwell out on my show with a head
No
kick.
kidding. Wow.
Um, and then we booked him for the next show, and he just we're at the airport waiting for me. He doesn't get off the plane. We make the phone calls, and he was in the Fighter House at the Ultimate Fighter, not season 1, but whatever season that
Yeah,
was.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I absolutely.
And he didn't even call you?
Yeah, there was some confusion there. I don't know if he handled it exactly the right way.
No. You're sitting there at the
I feel
airport. That's
I feel like I could have sued him, right? But
nah.
that stuff's not productive. You know what I mean? It's like if you
No.
waste money on that type of stuff.
It's a waste of energy. You just move on and find a new opponent and wish the guy well. There you go. Yeah, I've never had that happen. The worst thing for me was sitting there at before the first Freedom Fight event, and I'm at the airport, and Fitch comes through. You know, the American guys all come through, shuttle them, and I'm sitting there waiting for Tito Ortiz, Matt Horwich, and LeVar Johnson, Big LeVar,
Yeah.
and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, where are they? And then the Canada immigration guy comes out. Are you Mr. Rodley? I'm like, oh shit. Yep. They're like, yeah, this guy, this guy, this guy. We're not letting them in the country. I was like, well, that's not an option. I said, that's not an option. I said, look at this poster. I said, I got just flew in guys from TSN. This is the first primetime airing, blah, blah, blah. I gave him the whole spiel. I said, what's the issue? He says, well, one's got, I won't get into detail, but they all had priors that prevented them from getting in the country. So that was my big headache with that. So I literally had to open my laptop, put together a presentation at like 2 a.m. Like I was there for like 10 hours sitting at the airport. And yeah, and put a presentation with the full schedule of events, where they're going to be at every moment, exclaiming that I'm a full responsibility for them. And 2 of them I never even met. So here I am taking responsibility. They could be psycho killers. And so yeah, I had to go in, present that, and I'm up all night. And yeah, it was pretty fucked up. And then they said, okay, we'll let them all in. You need to put a $5,000 bond on each one. So I had to pull 15 grand out of my ass. Like, and this is like the day before the weigh-in. This is the Thursday night or maybe the Wednesday night. I'm not sure. So I do that, and LeVar comes in. Oh, thanks, brother. You know, nice guy, really nice guy. Matt Horwich comes walking, hair all over the fucking place. Is a great guy. I really like Horwich, but he's a unique dude.
Horror, which is special.
So in one hand, he's got this old Bible in his hand. His other hand, he has a tub of peanut butter, probably a gallon, and he's eating it. He's got peanut butter all over his hands. And I'm like, oh my God. And then in comes Tito with a big bag of team punishment shit to sell. And oh, what a thing, man.
Yeah.
But
I'll tell you a funny Horowitz story. Horowitz is a guy that he's unusual too. You know what I mean? And you do know what I mean. So,
very intelligent,
oh yeah, yeah,
very
no,
intelligent.
well read and that sort of thing, but not a lot of social abilities sometimes. You know. So
Mhm,
at one time in I think it was the what's the Mohegan Sun in Connecticut.
mhm.
Um, it's a dry area, right? It's on Indian territory, so they're not allowed to drink in there, or
Oh, that kind of dry. Yeah.
no sales. I mean, the casino you can drink, I guess, but there were no sales and in the area. And Don Fry was there, and Don was like, wanting to get some beers,
Oh,
so
yeah.
he was planning a run. And Dennis Hallman talks Matt Horwich into asking Don if while he's out getting beer, he can also get him a sandwich.
A what?
A sandwich.
A sandwich.
Yeah. And so
Okay.
Horowitz goes up to Don Fry, and Don Fry almost fought. I think Dennis had to step in and kind of break them up because Don did not take that well, and Horowitz was kind of starstruck and didn't even, you don't ask Don Fry for a sandwich when he's going on a beer run. That's the thing.
No, you say, hey, can you get me a case of beer? You want to go for a drive? Oh, yeah. Back then, you don't
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
sandwiches.
I like Horowitz. He worked in Abu Dhabi. He fought Abu Dhabi
Yeah.
when I was
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Just a real talented grappler as well. So,
Yep.
so yeah,
Yeah.
no,
He fought Krzysztof Brzezinski on that show. And
okay,
yeah,
cool.
he ended up, hold on. And come right away. Oh, my daughter's coming out for a visit in a half hour. That's all right. Yeah, he fought Krzysztof Brzezinski, and Krzysztof cut to 205 from, I think he cut like 30 pounds in 3 days, and he was bragging about it. And I like Krzysztof. This isn't a dog on him, but it showed you don't do that. You don't do that. And he went in and he just manhandled Horowitz, pounding him. There's pictures and video clips, his chunks of hair flying out. Like Krzysztof was just maiming him, and Horowitz just kept on going,
Well, he'll
and
weather
ended
a
up
storm.
wearing him out and choked him out and beat him.
He'll
And then
definitely weather
Krzysztof gets in the UFC.
for sure, for sure. So now let's go back to we're still we're with Freedom Fight and UCC. Talk about that transition for you. What I know with Stefan, you guys ran the biggest shows in Canada at the time.
Mhm.
But then there was would you call it a breakup? What led to you moving away and doing shows separately from it?
Yeah, I won't get into too much of the negativity because we have made amends. Let's just say we're two very different people. I had kids dedicated to my wife at the time, ex-wife now, yay. Um,
Mhm.
and he wasn't, and he didn't understand why I wouldn't move to Montreal and do this. And I said, look, I got a lot more to balance than you do. We were just two very different people. The way we approached business, the way we approached socially, the people we like to surround ourselves. It was just, and it just got to a point where every time my phone rang, I was fixing something or I was apologizing for bad behavior, stuff like that. And, and then just like the last show, I wasn't even really involved in it, but I think it was UCC 12, Pulver and Ludwig. And I didn't even go. I didn't even go to the show. And I said, yeah, I'm out, man. I got to do something else. And, and then I took, I believe, a year off. Yeah, then the UCC was born when Clyde Gentry called me up for an interview, kind of like this, for his book, NHB Evolution. I don't know if you got a copy of that. I got one downstairs.
Mhm.
And he's like, well, there's a lot of opportunities in Canada, let's think of something. And I'm working with Clint Dahl, who was Chemo's manager, which is ironic considering the headache on my first show at Chemo. And we come up with a concept, and I pitched it to TSN, and they gave me the primetime slot. And then I was back in, but I was doing the Freedom Fight thing, totally separate, no Quebec influence. So yeah, there was a breakup, but I needed to step away for. By then, I was maturing more as a person. I was maturing more as a business person, and I just didn't want the negativity around me, and I wanted to do it my way, and it worked out really good. And then Steph continued, and he did great things with TKO, and eventually I gave him a call when I found out he had some health issues, and I said, look, all the bullshit aside, look what we accomplished together. Look what we started. And he agreed, and yeah, we're cool now. So
Good, good. Yeah, I want to share a funny story with you relative to Clyde Gentry because he came to a lot of our early hook and shoot shows, and he's a real historian guy. You know what I mean? But I'll
mhm.
tell you something funny that Jeff Osborne, the hook and shoot promoter, I was the hook and shoot matchmaker, right? So Jeff, who me and him used to play this game where we would talk like, make fun of the language of Japanese and stuff like that. And it's very simple in English, if you switch your R's and your L's, you could, sort of make it sound like like you have a Japanese accent, joking around, right?
Oh my
Now,
God.
but the really, I know this might be offensive to some people, but the funny thing about it is, I remember being on the phone with him, and we figured out that if you do that with Clyde Gentry's name, he becomes Cried Gently.
And if you know him and you know his personality, that's kind of ironic.
He was a very mellow guy, from what I remember.
Very
Um,
delicate fella.
I remember he also ran a couple of shows, and that was the kind of thing where we thought, I thought he would be, Jeff and I think thought he might be misplaced with some of that, and I think he did a show called The Gathering, which was like kind of based like because the playing card game and stuff like that, and I that part of it, I think he did
Now,
a
that
little.
wasn't the ultimate athlete thing. That was something different
It may have been the start of that.
because they only
But
did one show because they had that riot that dude was fighting with the tattoo on his head. What was his name? It's actually a really nice guy. Um, fuck, you know what I'm talking about, right?
yeah, I know
He fought on.
I'm picturing it, but I don't remember the name.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was the one show Clyde participated in.
cry gently.
Cried. Oh my God. And that makes sense because I remember when Chuck got his cease and desist letter from Dana because he was the original coach on the first Freedom Fight event, right? So like 2 weeks before, Chuck calls, he's freaking out. Fuck Dana. I'm gonna. Da, da, da. I'm like, no, he's gonna make you a millionaire. And not Clyde, but Clint said the same thing. So Clint called Tito, and he replaced. And I remember when that happened. Oh my God, I thought Clyde was gonna cry, and you could tell.
Yeah,
He's a good guy.
he's a
You know,
great guy.
nothing
I
bad.
remember his first book, maybe the NHB Evolution or Revolution that you have there. But
Yeah,
he published that book in the '90s. Like it starts with Hoist and the whole thing. So he's definitely a guy um, that gets that little pioneer cap. So let's talk about Freedom Fight. So now you're on your
yeah,
own.
man.
You got
Yeah,
the
man.
TV spot. Talk a little bit about the politics that went into getting that TV spot, because you mentioned a little bit of it, but it couldn't have been easy, or maybe it was. Was it time? Was it something that MMA had already put into work, or how do you
I,
convince TV people just to get a TV spot? Is and 7 to 9. It's an
it was
amazing.
huge. It was huge. It was a lot easier than I thought it would be. To be honest with you, it was just a matter of Michael Landsberg was agreed to be the host. And he said, "Hey, let's go big. Let me put you in touch with the head of programming for TSN, which was owned by CTV, the biggest network conglomerate in Canada." So I had a meeting set, and I was just young. This was 2005, many years ago. So I had a one-page presentation presenting an Olympic themed event, USA versus Canada, and blah, 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 and made it all, you know, that way. And I went in, sat down, and shook his hand. We got along right away. First question he asked me, "Are you working with Stefan?" I said no. He says, "Okay, now we can talk." I was like, "Oh shit." That's not cool, but whatever. And 40 minutes later, I walked out with an LOI, with a letter of intent. It was really that easy. I walked in, walked out, and then it was like, then I realized, oh wow, I'm now an ad agency. I better learn about this because Canadian TV doesn't pay; they do a barter, so they give you half of the advertising inventory. So basically, I didn't get a dime from TSN, but I had 50% of the 30-second spots. I had all the opening and closing billboards. This fight brought to you by Budweiser, blah blah blah. So I walked out all da 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 with swagger. Then it hit me. Oh shit! I'm now an ad agency. So I learned about large agencies and found the head of buying for Labatt. So I got Budweiser and ended up having to sell a shit ton of sponsorship to make money on that. And that's where I learned how to do that. is out of necessity. I had to. And yeah, the buildup for that was huge. We had commercials on TSN, but yeah, it got put together relatively smooth. To be honest with you, I didn't know politics. I didn't have to finagle. No bullshit. TSN was great to deal with. Very, very supportive. Landsberg, very supportive. Yeah, I have no qualms. Smooth sailing
You
for
know,
once.
and as a businessman with Stefan and UCC, you guys were doing the kind of cranking out shows. You know what I mean? You went
Mhm.
UC1 and then you worked through UC12. You had 12 shows on your belt. With Freedom Fight, I think you took a little bit of a different strategy where it's like, was it a yearly show?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
What
I would promote it. I think they have a poster over there. I could actually show you, but it would say Ottawa's annual MMA event. So annual. So yeah, it was very rare that I did more than one a year. And you make people hungry for it. You know what I mean? Like if you have a barbecue every day and you're feeding someone burgers, they're not going to crave a burger. But if you have a barbecue once a year and no one's eating burgers all year, they're going to pay a lot more for that burger and they're going to enjoy it much more. And it gives you more time to build up, kind of like the original days where we would get all giggly and excited because the Ultimate's coming up in 10 months, 8 months, and there's no UFC until then. So you have that build up. And yeah, so I'd always do my shows the end of January, best gates I would ever have, believe it or not. And yeah, it was I would build it as Ottawa's event. So again, give people ownership of it. And I tied in with the community well and built it and did pre-events like all over the city, lots of promotion, tied in with businesses, sold a shit ton of local sponsors as well as the national stuff. And yeah, I think that strategy worked well for my family life. It gave me more time to do things properly. And
got muted somehow? Can't hear you. You're on mute. Pete?
yeah, let me
Okay, now you're back. Okay, gotcha.
okay. Oh shit. Hold on. Where'd you go?
Right here.
Let me get you back here. How do you expand this like that?
See,
Hey, sorry about that.
all good.
Yeah, just my daughter's coming out for a visit. Nice. Yeah,
So,
yeah, so what were we talking about?
well,
Refresh.
let me ask you. So, the first Freedom Fight is on TV.
Yep.
What was the fallout after that event? Like, was it a overwhelming feeling of success, or
Yeah.
and how?
Exhaustion.
Sure, sure. But did it become like the kind of thing that you were kind of famous for then, or like you said,
Yeah.
Ottawa? And who were the Ottawa fighters that you were booking there?
Well, that's where I also come to the realization that each fighter is going to sell if they come from a club that promotes, they're going to sell 50 to 100 tickets each. So I learned to cut them in 20 points on the tickets. Mostly was OAMA, Ottawa Academy of Martial Arts, Mark Holst and all those guys. But that didn't start till the next Freedom Fight. They were a little karate club, basically. And these guys were training Nick Castiglia, Mark Boots Holst, who ended up with a UFC fight. And that's where the local thing really kicked in. You know what I mean? So I would give them each 100 tickets and they would sell them, and they were just promo machines and great to deal with. The owner of the club at the time, he was a different character. A lot of people find him a certain way. I got along great. I like his straight shooter. I always enjoyed that. And then after he left for Florida, it was basically Nick and Boots Holst. and they were great. So I discovered the more local talent you have, the bigger gate you're going to have, and the more you have to promote. And then you could really call it Ottawa's annual event. Yeah, the local talent just exploded. Like when I did the first freedom fight, it was in Gatineau, Quebec, which is right across the river from Ottawa. So I was able to do the shows legally and not get arrested in Quebec. But the weigh-ins were at the Hard Rock Cafe downtown Ottawa. All the promotion was in Ottawa, the radio, Ottawa, everything was in Ottawa. Just the fight happened across the river. And yeah, that's when I really learned the value of tying in with community more. We were in tune, donating to women's shelters, Big Brother, Big Sister. I was tied in with I don't know what it's called down there. It's called community living, where they basically have group homes and services for people with disabilities, mentally handicapped, stuff like that. So I learned to tie in with all of these things and become part of the community. And it just went from 1,700 to 2,500 to 3,000 to consistently really healthy gates for my last 10 years before the last two shows in Sudbury were down
The
there.
biggest gate you ever got?
What's that?
What was the most tickets sold?
Whew. Probably that UCC, I think it was UCC 6 in Montreal with Payne versus that boxer guy. That was
Okay.
the biggest. That was like 6,000. I was averaging about 4K,
Okay.
4,000, which 2,000 people, that's on average 220,000 gate plus sponsorship. So it made sense to do one a year and do it proper because you're doing say 2,000 people, it's a couple 100,000, and then you sell 50 to 90 in sponsorship, and the show cost 150 to 170. I could feed my yard apes all year on that, no problem.
Yeah, I know that's a nice business model, and it worked out for you. And to put it in perspective, Canada's population is not what the U.S. has. So a 4,000 to 6,000 gate is
Yeah,
is pretty strong to
yeah.
to be able to pull in consistently. What was the most memorable fight that you pulled in?
Fight show or actual fight?
Well, let's do both. Let's start the show first. Your most memorable show, the one you're most proud of.
Probably my first freedom fight in Quebec and the last freedom fight in Quebec. It was like almost like a sandwich. The beginning was like, the end was, and the meat on the inside, the middle shows in between those two they were good. They were above par, but not what those two were. The first one, of course, being the first nationally televised. I got these dudes coming in from all over, Goodrich, Tito, Jordan. That was huge. And then the last one I actually did a thing with Much Music, which is like our MTV, where one of the VJs wanted to fight MMA. And I think his brother contacted me. Oh, I got my brother. His name's Robin. He's a VJ on Much Music, and he's doing a show called Robin Black Cage Fighter. So it's this little skinny guy with pink hair wanting to get into MMA. So they contacted me and said, "Hey, I heard you're doing a trials down there in Toronto with, I believe, with Rob Peltier, Coach Rob Peltier. That'd be someone for you to talk to. That guy's cool." Anyhow, I'll send you the link to it. It's actually pretty funny. So I do the trials, and then he's like, "Oh, there's Pete Rodley from Freedom Fight MMA shows up. The big cheese," he says. I was like, "Oh my God." And he introduced himself. I said, "Hey, I saw good things, blah blah blah, and I'd like to offer you your first fight." So that really was a big deal for this show. Not to mention that, but I had 3 title fights. It was the debut of a guy named Glenn Kulka. He was in WWF, the NHL. He's a CFL Hall of Famer, which is like our NHL. So there was a lot of outside celebrities, pseudo celebrities fighting on it. I already had the momentum of the local guys. Boots was the champion. So that was a huge show. That got a really good gate. I think we did closer to 45, 46, maybe 100 people. So yeah, to answer your question, the first freedom fight and the last one in Quebec were probably my proudest moments.
Okay, good. That's like you said, nice sandwich there. Nice sandwich. Why'd you stop?
Uh, well, I won't get too much into it, but after that show that I just spoke of, there was an attempted robbery on me. It was fucking huge, very damaging in many ways. I got out virtually unscathed, but a friend of mine who was actually fighting in UFC at the time, he was scheduled to fight in Toronto, was in a medically induced coma for 6 days. The guy, actually, Glenn Kulka, and his opponent, who was also a good friend of mine. So I had two good friends fighting that night. They were both in the room because they hit it off after the fight, and they were like, yeah. And yeah, like 10 dudes came in and said, oh, this guy just had the biggest show of his career. He's probably walking around bling bling with 70 grand, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, I had 50 bucks in my wallet, and I'm not a bling bling guy, I'm not a big drinker. And they come in the hotel room, and I thought it was a joke, and they were fine. Give me all your fucking money, blah, 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 blah. I ended up getting tased in my head 3 times, got tased in my chest 4 times. And then at the same time, when I got home, again, I won't get into details, but a lot of negativity at home. My ex-wife was going off the rails and disappearing, and bad. It was a bad divorce, a lot of father isolation. I had some PTSD from the incident,
Mhm.
that I needed to deal with. And yeah, I needed to deal with other things. And I didn't really feel like going back to Quebec after that. Like, a lot of fighters were coming to their own conclusions. Very few actually called and said, how are you? After, when you do so much for so many and that happens, it leaves you a little disheartened. And I don't want to come off like a whiny bitch, because I'm not, but it puts things in perspective. So to this day, I'm friends with guys like Monster. I'm friends with guys like Ian Daw, who was in the Evan Tanner documentary. Actually, Evan came up to corner him on that show. Um, Guys like that continuously reached out and said, thank you for the opportunity. How are you? And to this day, 13, 14, 15 years later, I still talk to them. So I needed to focus on Pete. I needed to step away from the game. I needed to deal with what happened. Because when you're in high profile and something like that happens, like, it was literally on the front page of every paper in Canada. So I had to wake up, deal with the politics of what was going on, make sure everyone was okay. Like, there was some major gross shit. Like, it looked like a fucking CSI crime scene in the hotel room. Blood. It was very traumatic. So I needed to get that straight, which I did. I needed to find my path and see what my next stage of life's going to be, and ended up being a very sour, long divorce process. Things are smooth now, but yeah, I just needed to focus on that, man. Yeah.
Sure. No, I didn't know that actually. That that is how it came to an end. Have you? What year was that?
2007.
Okay. Have you
No,
considered?
no, 2008. Sorry,
Okay.
2008.
So
Yep,
now that some time has gone by, did you ever consider bringing it back?
I
5 years
did.
later, 10 years later.
I did. My last two shows were 2010 and 2011. It was always a
Okay.
dream to work at home. So I did two smaller events in Sudbury, so which is 45 minutes from my front door. The last one, I actually flew Nate Diaz and his partner Misty, flew them up with the help of Caesar Gracie. I was trying to get him up as well. So I brought in Nate as a guest. I had Nuri Shakir fight Dan Roberts, who fought in the UFC. I don't like that guy. I'll tell you straight up. That guy was a pain in the ass. After the show, Roberts, he was telling the commission I didn't pay him and this and that. And the commission's like, no, Pete pays us and we pay you. Well, that's not what we agreed. Oh no, we have the contract. Like, and he was like telling Caesar shit like that. And I was like, you know what, man, fuck you. Like, pardon my French. Yeah, That's the one of maybe two people in all my years that I can say, you know what? I could care less if I see that guy again. But he fought Nuri. Nuri's awesome. I
Yeah,
love that guy,
Nuri's a great
man.
guy. I've fought
Oh,
Nuri a few times.
dude, his energy. When you're having a conversation, sometimes I got to tell him, like, talk more slow. I can't compute. You know how Nuri talked, eh? So much energy. I love that guy. I had the first female fight in Ontario was on that show. Valerie Letourneau and oh, I forget her name. Hagelman, Hentelman, Tanya Hentelman from Halifax. Yeah, they were. That was the first female fight, MMA fight, in on Ontario soil. So those were my last two shows, and then I was 3/4 done the second one, and I look over at my buddy. I said, "I just made a decision." He said, "What's that? You're gonna do another show somewhere wild?" I said, "No, I'm done, man. I retire. That's it. I'm out of here." And that was the last show I did. Was 2000, 2011.
Well, what made you make that decision? How, in during the show, was it something that the repetition or the you become it just started to wear on you, or
Well, it's like anything. When you do the same thing for over 20 years, whether you're an electrician, a plumber, or whatever, you're going to want to do other stuff. You know what I mean? And the thing is, and the game's not what it was. The excitement, the thrill, the danger, the unknown. The athletes are different now too, man. They really are. People were hungry and they did it for the passion, and everyone got along, whether they were fighting each other or not. It was the respect, but it was organized chaos back in the day, and I love that. The unknown, the fact that we're doing something that no one else is doing. It was hardcore. It was hardcore back in the day. And with this last show, I had a kid show up, first fight of the night, first pro fight. He was like 4-1 as an amateur, but I saw his potential. And he was the first fight of the night. So people aren't going to see him. Let's call a spade a spade. And he was getting 15 plus 15, 1,500 to show, 15. So he wins. He gets 3K in his first fight. Not bad in a small regional show.
yeah,
I think, right?
that might
It's
be good
fair.
nowadays. So
And this was like 13 years ago, too, right? And the night before, he comes up to my room with his manager, and they were trying to trying to say, "Oh, you know what? We think we should get more than this," and blah blah blah. So I said, "Oh, really?" I think Nate was in the room, if I'm not mistaken. My girlfriend at the time, Jackie, was in the room, and they were like literally hovering over me when I'm sitting and trying to bully me. And I said, "Well, let me tell you a little story about when I started in the game. This is what it was like. This is who you're complaining about getting 15 plus 15. And you show up and you get your per diem, you got your gas money, your hotel, you have a schedule of events, you're treated like gold, and you perform well. I'm going to give you greater opportunities. I'm going to send you to bigger people that I know." And this guy was complaining. So I explained that to him, and I think he realized, oh shit. And so I said, "You know what? You're not as important as you think." So I called his opponent and I said, "Yeah." He was in his room. I said, "Yeah, there's an issue with your opponent. Fights off. I said, I'm going to give you your show money, and Gary, I'm going to get you a fight somewhere else next week because you're already medicaled up. Not your fault." But it was, "Oh, okay, shit happened. More than fair." I said, "Yeah, come party, have a great time. I'll give you your per diem, give you your show money, and then some." I ended up giving him 2 grand for nothing. Then I called up the hotel front desk. I said, "Yeah, so and so's room. It's now free. He's going home tonight." And I looked at the kid and I said, "Get the fuck out of my hotel."
and
And
that's
that's when it started. I
yeah,
never encountered stuff like that. People were more appreciative. There's a lot of great athletes. I'm not gonna say everyone's like that, but there was more and more prima donnas. The attitude was different,
yeah.
and I just wasn't feeling it, man. I needed to. I had some health issues going on. My folks, there were things with the family going on, and I needed to focus on. And it was just time for a change. So yeah, so I dipped out and just did consulting for 3 years, and then I started a small business. I had a a store in the mall called Home Style Foods. It was all local, natural. Did that, and then I dipped out of that. And then I stumbled on this opportunity here, which I thought was a volunteer position. So I travel and I assist people with cognitive issues and severe injuries now. And that's what I do. That's why I'm always up north in the middle of nowhere. My regular brings me up there every week. I drive 5 hours, stay there all week, and then drive 5 hours home. So
So
that's life, man.
you never get the bug to return to the sport anymore?
Every day, every day. Yeah, you know what the worst is? I got my little it's an eye thingy, the little iPad where you put music and shit and you Bluetooth it in your vehicle. So I ripped everything off my laptop onto that from my iTunes on my laptop, right? So I don't know how, but my last round of radio ads came from Sudbury ended up on there. So I'll be driving and listening to whatever, Billy Joel, Michael Bublé, Napalm Death, whatever comes on, I go for. And then all of a sudden, Freedom Fight, MMA invades the Sudbury Arena. And it's like, fuck. And I get calls from people, oh man, you got to get back into it. The sport isn't what it used to be. Like the biggest events in Canada, no one knows about, man. And they're doing great stuff. He seems like a nice guy, but it just doesn't have the aura that it did. So I itched to do it, but it's a different time ago. It's a different sport.
Yeah, you were last time we talked, you were getting like a to visit one of the shows that was going on in Canada. Has that happened yet, or is that still coming up?
I didn't go. I
What
drove
what
right.
happened there? Just
It was my first real holiday. I've been dreaming. I haven't been in Niagara Falls in a long time, and I went with someone, and I said, you know what? I'm going to go there. Not one person's going to know who I am. The promoter didn't even really know who I was. I didn't recognize one fighter. I look at the fight camps. I didn't recognize one school. I contact all my people. Hey, you going to this event in Toronto? It looks like a good show. Sounds like a great guy. They're like, we don't even know about it. We never even heard about it. So I say, you know what? What am I going to do? Walk around and I don't go to shows. I don't want people to kiss my ass. I don't want, oh, there's a legend, blah, 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 because I'm not. I'm just a guy who was crazy enough to put his nuts on the chopping block back in the day, just like you did, Miguel. That's it. I don't want people kissing my ass, but I'd like to be able to go and feel respect, like and be able to socialize. I was going there to see old friends and socialize, but those days are done. All the old friends are either out of the game, retired, or feel like me and it's a different game and they don't want to go and hang out with a bunch of hypersensitive young kids with nail polish on and shit, like I'm a lot like Don Fry in that regard. You know what I mean? They're not they don't got the cojones. So it's a different thing. So I drove right by Toronto, went straight to Niagara Falls, didn't even go.
gotcha. Wow.
No desire. No desire. I barely even watch the sport anymore because I used to. Hey, my buddy Nate's fighting Connor. I'm gonna check that out. Or
Yeah,
oh yeah, my
I
buddy.
feel that way too. Now that a lot of the fighters that I know and you personally are retired, starting to retire, out of the
Retired or dead. Like,
yeah.
like
So once that happened, I watch the UFC still, but usually not live. I usually watch it afterwards,
they're too
replay.
late, man.
Yeah.
Like last night, I was trying to stay up to watch the Perry fight, which and that this is an example of how things have changed. Okay, the there was no mention of it anywhere. I go on Facebook and I'm looking for a link to watch it. Nothing, nothing at all. But the thing is, the UFCs they don't start till 10 o'clock at night, man. I start my day I'm up at 5 every morning getting
Yeah.
shit done. By 10 o'clock, like I'm smoking a tree and going to sleep. Like
Yeah.
I'm down, I got shit to do in the morning. I'm not staying up till 1 in the morning to watch a fight, and then 9 times out of 10 they're boring as shit. And yeah, no, it's just not worth it. I don't even remember the last UFC fight I watched. I think was the last Strickland fight with Duplessis.
Okay.
And that was a lackluster fight. I was all excited. I drank coffee all night and stayed up till 1 in the morning to watch it. And bleh, like, what the hell did I do that for? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a different vibe. It's not the whole the you get anxious for it. And there's like 2 UFCs a week now, so there's no way as a fan. It's oversaturated. So how do I keep track of these fighters? I can't. There's unless that's a full-time job to like I look at the top 10. I don't know who the hell these people are. And yeah, it's a totally different game now. I love it. I love the sport. It answered every question I had about martial arts, but the mainstream stuff just isn't what it used to be. It just doesn't tickle my fancy.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a feeling that goes for a lot of people from the old days like that, that
Yeah,
it
man.
just uh became cookie cutter, you know.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, like every dude wears the nail polish. They're all yelling and ranting and raving and being disrespectful, like Connor McNugget. They all got the fucking tribal tattoos. I think they all, they take carpet and rub their ears so that they have cauliflower ears. They shave their head. They're all like the same.
yeah.
And I
I
liked it
think
when
I think to
everyone
me
was
the uniform, the Venom uniform,
hate it.
I can understand the corporate end of it, and Dana
Hmm.
thinking, but at the end of the day, they're pocketing money from that and taking money away from the fighters. You know what I
Big
mean?
time.
It's something
Big time.
even though, there were times where um it does kind of look, when you have 17 patches on your shorts for sponsors and stuff, it does have an element of being a little bit trashier than what it looks like now. But
Especially some of the sponsors back in the day. You remember that one dude that showed up and no one noticed until he slammed the guy down? He was in his guard and he posted to get out. So his ass is in the air and he had cum depot on his
yeah,
ass or
yeah.
cum deposit or something like that. I was like, wow, that wasn't well thought out.
So for
Or
sure,
the whole Golden Palace painted on your back. Remember those days?
yeah, those,
But
but I don't, I wouldn't have, just, it's not my instinct to say, let's put a uniform on everybody because I can't handle that,
it's
or,
cheesy. They look like those Power Rangers or something. It's
yeah,
cheesy.
but it also added an element of that made them kind of unique, the guys, like some guys, like, you know, the guys that got a lot of sponsors also put a lot of work into it and
Hmm.
were serious and stuff like that. So, and they were making more money from sponsorships than from the actual fights,
A lot
you
of
know.
them were.
So, um, yeah, it's just one of the elements that's just different now, and one of the things that makes it less
Makes it
appealing to.
look cookie cutter. They all look the same. They all
Yeah,
look the same. A lot of them act the same, and a lot of them fight the same. There's
yeah,
no identity. You don't got like your Kevin Rosers, your Dan Severns, your Mark Coleman's, your Maurice Smiths, your
St. Peter's.
Payne Peters, and yeah, it's very different, but it's like anything that I've gotten into in my life. I was just talking with a friend of mine. They say the underground of one generation is the mainstream of the next. So me in the early '80s, I grew up listening to like extreme metal and hardcore punk and stuff like that. Now you turn on the radio and every song's got that dun 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 dun.
Yeah,
And the punk is all watered down pop Green Day shit. So it's like mainstream.
yeah.
Metallica's on the radio and
What's really funny to me is, in speaking of punk rock, there's a great live record that Social Distortion put out.
yeah, I've
And,
heard it.
Social Distortion, the singer in that, makes mention of this exact thing. He goes, and he says something along the lines of, "You can go to the mall to get your pussy pierced now." You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah. Yeah, and
And
everyone's got tattoos now. Everyone, it
the
used to be
mohawk.
where
I remember being in New York, and you had to go, to Avenue A to see people with blue mohawks and stuff like that, and the leather and the stuff like that. It was an area where those people hung out, and that's, I guess, where you could get piercings and things like that. But
EBGBs.
you couldn't just go to the mall and ask them to, give you a dyed purple mohawk,
Oh
not
no, that was a do-it-yourself thing for
yeah,
sure back in the day. But yeah, it's true. Like you got like the Kardashians walking around with a Slayer t-shirt. It's like, okay, name one Slayer song. You fucking idiot. Like I hate that, and no one's
yeah,
a bigger Slayer fan than this guy. And it's funny because Gary Holt, who replaced Hanneman when he died in Slayer, he saw that, posted on her thing, like, what the fuck? The next night, he goes and does a festival in Germany, and his shirt says "Kill the Kardashians."
that's funny. That's
Yeah,
funny.
man. Yeah. But the parallel between that type of music and what I was always into and the game, it was raw, it was rough, it was real. But the thing is, it was the epitome of yin and yang. And that's how I live my life. There's no black and white in life, it's all shades of gray. And for me, I like the yin and yang. I like having that hardcore side, that release of the music or the cage fight or whatever. But then you go to one of these gigs and you're seeing a guy with like a Napalm Death t-shirt, and they're the most intelligent, soft, no one wants to hurt each other. There's never any fights. That yin and the yang, right? You don't expect that. Same thing back in the day. Like I remember introducing my mom to our lightweight champion at the time, this guy named Phil Hughes. He's passed away. One of the nicest guys. And mom's like, "Oh, was that like a journalist or a librarian?" I'm like, "No, that's our lightweight champion." And he took the time to go over. He bowed to my mother. The sweetest, most unassuming, kind people that I've ever met in my life are from our cage fighters. And I
Yeah.
love that balance. I love that yin and that yang. And that's been my basis of life, man. I got to have my wild side, but I'm out there volunteering, helping people. I'm a kid guy. I like playing in the garden, but I like to bang. you know, and that's
All right, brother.
important.
We've been going another hour and a half. I think we've
Has it been an hour and a half?
I think so. We started
Jesus
about
Christ.
7:30 my time. It's about 9 now.
Wow, we
So
got to have drinks sometime and do a part three. Holy. And we didn't even, yeah, well, we got pretty much to the end of the career to now. I think we nailed it.
we covered a good bit. We covered a good bit. We probably missed some details in there that may warrant a third conversation. It's always good talking to you, Pete. And you know what I want you to
Likewise.
do? I want you to follow up for me and shoot Payne Peters that email, and let's
I
work on
will. I
getting
will.
some of the Canadian guys, like you mentioned, one of the trainers who would be interesting to talk to. Let's work on getting some of them to sit down for interviews, and we can maybe do them together. That way you can kind
Yeah,
of join the podcast and help me document Canadian history.
sure. Sure. I got a few guys in mind. Have you had Bill on the show, Mahud?
Well, yes,
Okay,
yes.
that's a guy to have on.
I've had
Jason
Mahood,
Dara.
Jason
Jason
Darrow.
Dara would be a good
I
one.
worked with him once. Um, I think he would definitely be interesting. He's from like Kenosha or Canola. Where's he from? What's the name of that town?
Yeah, northern BC.
God, it's
Some
beautiful. It's
some
beautiful.
valley or some shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
he would be a guy. Um, even Stefan,
yeah, Stefan would be fascinating.
he wouldn't do it
Also,
though.
like
He
if
will. He
some of the
won't do it. But I
yeah,
could think of a few fighters. I could
yeah,
think
the
of a few
fighters too.
fighters.
The fighters obviously would be the crux of it.
Yeah.
I've done interviews between this podcast and the previous podcast I was on with a few guys. We got Sam Stout, and a lot of guys from that team. What was their name of
See,
their?
that's a whole episode right now. Like when I met Sean Tompkins, he was in the corner of a guy named Robbie Talek, who I was actually managing. I actually just found his contract when I was going through old shit with the IFC. He fought in the IFC on the Kanawaki, the underground shows, and his contract 300 plus 300.
Yeah,
That's what he made. And Tompkins was with him. He was in the back. He was his trainer, training with him, holding mitts. And he was so shy and introverted and out of his element. And to see, he tried fighting, wasn't his thing, but he definitely fell into his own with training and ended up being a world-class trainer. I love that kind of stuff, man. You know, anyone from the Tompkins camp would be a great go. Mark Hominick,
Yeah,
very well
we
spoken.
did Hominick.
You
We
did
got Hominick.
Hominick too.
Yeah.
How did I miss this shit, man? I would love. I remember when he came in and he fought Nanku in his debut. Everyone was laughing at him. This quiet little kid didn't even look like he was old enough to shave. He beat Nanku so bad. That was at UCC 10 in Gatineau.
Yeah.
Fucking Nanku puked in the ring. He beat him so
Wow.
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Hominick was the real deal, and he's another guy,
Mhm.
that fought out of his weight class, and paid a lot of dues.
And that
And
that that picture of that thing on his head,
yeah,
classic. What was
yep,
that against Aldo, eh?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
all right, brother, I'm gonna turn it off here so we can pick up for part 3 later on. Okay.